Anyone who has stayed up all night cursing an author knows exactly how these toxic novels go. The male lead is always a cruel monster, the female lead is a spineless saint, and the supporting male is just a tool used until he is broken, even having his kidneys sacrificed for the plot. I had just finished trashing the author for being an idiot when I woke up as Davis Miller, the pathetic supporting character everyone hated. In the original story, I was drowned by the male lead, slapped 81 times on the female lead's orders, locked in a basement for 3 days, and eventually had my leg broken and a kidney stolen. This time, I refused to play along. I'm not going to be a simp or try to redeem myself. I'm going to turn the main couple into the villains they truly are and flip this dark romance into a story of pure revenge. I realized I had somehow been pulled into the very novel I just finished reading. It was a twisted and dark romance story. To my horror, I had become the pathetic supporting character destined for misery. The story had already reached its most infamous scene. The male lead, Ethan, was violently shoving my head into the freezing ocean waves. He claimed he was doing it to teach me a lesson I would never forget. Suddenly, a transparent wall of live comments began scrolling across my vision. The messages flickered frantically through the air like they were possessed. Here we go. It is time for that pathetic loser to get on his knees and beg for mercy again. Damn, he is getting destroyed, so why can't he just walk away from her? The guy is nothing more than a doormat for everyone to trample on. I bet he won't learn his lesson until the lead finally snaps his legs. Exactly. He deserves to have his legs broken and his kidney harvested. That is what he gets for being an annoying obstacle between the main couple. Even though everyone knows he was not the one who pushed that person into the sea. He did not plan the kidnapping or leak the corporate secrets either. This is brutal, and I cannot believe the hero is getting away with this. They are framing him for every single crime imaginable. I stared at the live feed of comments until my mind went completely numb. Are they really going to break my legs and steal my kidney? I frantically twisted my head around to scan my surroundings. I saw Ethan standing there with a sadistic smirk playing on his lips. Isabella stood beside him with an expression as cold as a winter frost. A group of stone-faced bodyguards in black suits surrounded the entire area. It was over because there was absolutely no way out of this. I gritted my teeth and threw my entire weight into a sudden struggle. I managed to rip my arm out of Ethan's iron grip with sheer force. With a massive splash, I threw myself backward into the crashing waves. I vanished into the dark and murky depths of the ocean in an instant. The moment I opened my eyes, a freezing voice sliced through the silence. Davis, I told you that I would let you keep your title as my fiancé if you just behaved. A handsome and soaking wet young man began to sob as his eyes turned red with tears. Isabella, I honestly have no idea what I did to deserve this. Why does Ethan hate me so much that he wants to kill me over and over again? The woman stood there in her perfect outfit, looking down with eyes full of pity. She reached out and pulled the handsome young man into a gentle embrace. Ethan, you are truly the most kind-hearted soul in the entire world. She whispered softly that it was her fault for being too soft on Davis, which allowed him to hurt Ethan. Do not be afraid, because she promised that she would never let him get away with it this time. She turned to her security detail and ordered them to drag Davis back onto the shore. She wanted him to feel the agonizing sensation of drowning with his own lungs. My head was spinning, and I could not make sense of anything happening around me. I had a sinking feeling that the names they were using were terrifyingly familiar. Before I could process the thought, several guards grabbed me and hauled me up. They dragged my body across the sand and onto a jagged rock by the water. Isabella Harrison turned around, and her voice became sweet again as she looked at Ethan Miller. Ethan, I want you to be the one to personally deliver his punishment today. Hold his head under the water until he begs for forgiveness, and then you can stop. A series of hateful whispers suddenly hissed directly into my ear. You are a pathetic loser for trying to take my woman, and you deserve to die for it. With a violent splash, my entire head was shoved deep into the salty ocean water. The freezing water rushed into my nose and ears, and the shock of it made me instantly alert. Davis Miller, Ethan Miller, and Isabella Harrison were all characters from that dark romance novel I had just finished. I realized with horror that I had been sucked into the world of the book. My new identity was Davis Miller, the most pathetic and abused supporting character in the entire story. In the original plot, Isabella was engaged to Davis before everything went wrong. However, the manipulative and evil male lead, Ethan, had set his sights on her. Ethan Miller was her childhood friend who had grown up right alongside her. When Ethan returned from living abroad, Isabella threw a massive welcome home party in his honor. The two of them toasted each other with linked arms while laughing intimately right in front of Davis. Davis was so furious that he turned around and stormed out of the party immediately. Ethan followed him out while acting like a victim and then proceeded to slap himself hard in front of Davis. He ran back to the ballroom, crying with a swollen face, and began telling lies about what happened. He claimed that he had only tried to apologize to Davis, but was brutally beaten instead. Isabella did not even hesitate to believe him, and she flew into a blind rage. She had her guards pin Davis down, while she personally slapped him 81 times as a punishment. Despite the abuse, Davis was still a pathetic and obsessed lover who could not let go. He remained devoted to Isabella Harrison no matter how much she humiliated or tortured him. He continued to follow her around like a puppy while clinging to his dying hope for her love. He hoped that she would eventually see Ethan for who he really was and choose him instead. Ethan eventually became her assistant and staged a fake kidnapping just to frame Davis for the crime. Isabella punished Davis by locking him in a dark basement for 3 days without a single drop of water. By the time they let him out, he was barely clinging to life after the brutal ordeal. Ethan then leaked sensitive corporate data and made sure all the evidence pointed directly at Davis. Davis was arrested and thrown into a cell where he was repeatedly beaten and humiliated by other inmates. He was released a month later due to lack of evidence, but his body was covered in scars. During a corporate retreat at the beach, Ethan jumped into the ocean and claimed Davis pushed him. He lied to everyone and said that Davis had tried to drown him in the waves. Davis was held under the water until his lungs were screaming for air and he nearly died. He refused to confess to a crime he did not commit even as he faced death. They nearly drowned him and then broke his leg as a way to make him pay for his sins. When Ethan was diagnosed with kidney failure, Isabella forced Davis to give up one of his kidneys. Isabella forced Davis to give up one of his kidneys without a second thought. Davis spent 2 weeks recovering in a hospital bed, but Isabella never bothered to visit him once. That was the moment Davis Miller finally woke up from his delusion and decided to walk away. He vanished from her life without saying a single word to anyone. The toxic couple Isabella and Ethan got to live their perfect life while Davis was left broken. This plot was absolutely garbage, and I could not believe someone actually wrote this trash. I had just been screaming at my phone about how stupid the author was for writing this. I never expected to be transported into the book as the most pathetic character in the story. Now, I was the one fighting for my life while being held under the freezing water. The live comments started blowing up again as everyone waited for me to start begging for mercy. I cannot believe he is still obsessed with her after all the things she has done. He is a total lost cause, and he deserves to have his legs snapped for being annoying. He deserves to lose his legs and his kidney for being such a pathetic loser. It is crazy because he did not actually commit any of the crimes they are accusing him of. Ethan is a complete monster for framing him, but the readers still think this is romantic. Someone needs to ban that hater because Ethan only did those things because Davis would not leave. Ethan only did those things because Davis would not leave him alone. Ethan is just being smart and protecting his relationship, and that is why we all love him. As the comments scrolled by, I could see my entire miserable future laid out before me. They wanted to break my legs and steal my kidney, but I was not going to let that happen. I decided to fake my death and disappear just to see how this toxic couple would survive without me. I kicked my legs hard and broke through the surface of the water to gasp for air. I used every ounce of my strength to rip myself away from Ethan's grasp. I dove head first into the crashing waves with a massive splash that echoed across the beach. I sank deep into the dark water until there was no sign of me left on the surface. The comment section went silent for a few seconds before absolutely exploding with confusion. This is not how the story goes, and someone needs to find the author right now. Did Ethan just kill him because this looks like a massive disaster for the plot? It's over because this looks like a massive disaster for the plot. I am pretty sure the book said that Davis does not even know how to swim. The waves are huge, and there is no way he can survive out there in the deep water. Ethan really messed up this time, and now the entire story is going to fall apart. Every single person standing on the beach was frozen in complete shock. Isabella Harrison's eyes filled with tears because she knew Davis could not swim a single stroke. She only wanted to scare him into being less jealous of Ethan, and she never meant for him to die. She stumbled toward the water and screamed for help with a voice that was breaking with emotion. She screamed for someone to call an ambulance and the Coast Guard immediately. The security team realized the situation was dire, and they scrambled to start a search. Several strong swimmers jumped into the water to search the jagged rocks along the coast. The rest of the staff frantically called for emergency services to come to the beach. The peaceful beach was transformed into a scene of pure chaos and panic. Ethan turned pale and began to stammer out excuses with a voice that was shaking. Isabella, you have to believe me, because I did not push him and he jumped on his own. He is just trying to make you feel sorry for him by framing me for this. Isabella glared at him with eyes that were no longer soft, but filled with a freezing rage. Ethan Miller, you need to shut your mouth right now. Ethan stood there completely frozen by the intensity of her anger. This was the very first time Isabella had ever used such a harsh tone with him. He felt a surge of resentment because he could not believe she was choosing that loser over him. He was absolutely furious that his plan was starting to fail. He had worked so hard to win her over, and he refused to let everything fall apart now. He grabbed her arm and begged her to listen to his side of the story. She told him to get his hands off her immediately. Isabella violently shoved his hand away and stepped back from him. The force of her shove was so strong that Ethan stumbled backward several feet. His eyes filled with tears, and he put on a performance of pure heartbreak and misery. Isabella, the first know that you will never believe another word that comes out of my mouth. If you truly believe I am a murderer, then there is no reason for me to keep living. Since you think I killed him, I will just jump into the ocean and die by his side. He did not even wait for her to answer before he threw himself off the jagged rocks. Isabella screamed his name in a state of pure panic. Isabella turned pale and lunged forward to grab his arm before he could fall. Ethan, I was wrong to doubt you, and I promise I believe you, so please do not let go. Her arm was sliced open by the sharp rocks, and blood began to pour from the wound. She was in agonizing pain, but she refused to let go of him as she pulled him up. The security team saw the danger and rushed over to help pull them both to safety. The guards abandoned the search in the water to focus on saving Ethan and Isabella. It took several men to pull the soaking wet and shivering Ethan back onto the solid ground. Isabella held him tightly in her arms, as if he would vanish if she let go for even a second. Ethan huddled against her chest while pretending to be a broken and innocent victim. He looked at the deep gash on her arm and began to cry about how it was all his fault. Isabella, your arm is bleeding, and I am so sorry that my impulsiveness caused you pain. Isabella held him even tighter and whispered that she was the one to blame for doubting him. A dark flash of triumph crossed Ethan's eyes as he realized he had won her back. The live comment section was going absolutely wild over Ethan's incredible acting performance. I cannot believe he actually got away with that, because his acting is better than most movie stars. I'm officially a fan of this guy because his looks and talent are perfect for a leading man. I thought the story was ruined, but his performance was so moving that I almost started crying. Davis is such a jerk for trying to ruin Ethan's reputation before he died in the ocean. Wait a minute, because it looked like Ethan was actually trying to murder him just now. How can this guy be the hero? And someone needs to delete that negative comment right now. Ethan only did what he had to do because Davis refused to leave Isabella alone. There is nothing wrong with a man doing whatever it takes to protect the woman he loves. You people are crazy for supporting a man who uses manipulation and murder to get what he wants. Ethan is nothing more than a toxic and manipulative piece of garbage who belongs in prison. I'm glad to see that I'm not the only one who realizes how evil the main character is. The author of this book must be insane because the morality of this story is completely twisted. It was a blind spot on the camera, so there's a chance that Ethan did not actually push him. Isabella believes him, so you all should just shut up and worry about your own lives. I managed to swim to a different set of rocks and quietly climb back onto the shore. The original Davis could not swim, but I grew up in Malibu, and these waves were nothing to me. The comment section went crazy again when they realized that Davis was actually still alive. The book said he cannot swim, so I need someone to explain how he is still breathing. Because this looks like a fake death. He is too stupid to plan a fake death, but Ethan still needs that kidney later in the story. If he actually died, the entire plot would be ruined and the story would have nowhere to go. I ignored the comments, but I used the live feed to keep track of everything happening on the beach. My plan to frame Ethan for pushing me into the ocean did not work as well as I hoped. I could not believe that Isabella was stupid enough to think that Ethan was actually innocent. I felt a sudden wave of anger on behalf of the original Davis and all the pain he suffered. Davis had been Isabella's loyal servant for 7 long years from college until they started working. He had always put her needs above his own in every single situation they faced together. Back in college, Isabella was the untouchable ice queen that every guy on campus wanted to date. Davis fell in love with her the moment they met, and he never stopped chasing after her. He bought her endless gifts and even serenaded her with a guitar outside her dorm on her birthday. He once bought every firework in the city just to put on a private show for her. When Isabella got sick, he hiked to a famous mountain chapel just to pray for her health. He climbed the entire mountain on his knees just to show how much he cared about her recovery. The story went viral on Facebook, and everyone was talking about how devoted he was to her. Even after all of that, Isabella still refused to give him a chance or be his girlfriend. Everything changed when a business rival who was ruined by the Heiress family came back for blood. A man with a knife cornered Isabella in a dark alley, and she had nowhere left to run. Just as the man attacked her, Davis jumped out of the shadows and began to fight him off. During the violent struggle, Davis was stabbed deep in the side by the attacker's blade. Isabella held him while sobbing and tried to stop the bleeding with her bare hands. He was rushed to the emergency room, and luckily the knife had missed his vital organs. Isabella stayed by his side in the hospital every single day until he was finally discharged. Their relationship finally began to blossom, and they officially became a couple after that night. She held him close and promised that she would never leave him because he had saved her life. It was tragic that 7 years of pure devotion would eventually turn into a cruel joke. Everything started to fall apart the very day that Ethan Miller returned to the city. I pushed those painful memories aside and pulled my phone out of my pocket. Luckily, my phone was waterproof, so it still worked perfectly even after being in the ocean. I scrolled through my contacts and placed a call to Chloe Sterling immediately. An hour later, a silver Maserati came to a screeching halt right in front of me. A woman who was even more beautiful than Isabella Harrison stepped out of the luxury car. She had incredibly long legs that would make even a professional supermodel feel jealous. Before I arrived in this world, the original Davis had been brutally beaten by Isabella's guards. My leg had been sliced open by the rocks and blood was still dripping onto the sand. I looked like a complete mess, as if I had just crawled out of war zone. Chloe saw my injuries, and her face crumpled as she began to sob uncontrollably. She threw herself into my arms and held me so tight that I gasped in pain. She asked me if Isabella Harrison did this to me, and she swore she would kill her. I did not say a single word, but instead I leaned down and kissed her deeply. Chloe was shocked at first, but then she began to kiss me back with intense passion. She wrapped her arms around my neck and returned the kiss with desperate hunger. The live comments were losing their minds because they could not understand what was happening. Someone told me to stop because I was only supposed to be obsessed with Isabella. People were calling me a scumbag, and they could not believe how much the story had changed. I'm glad he found someone else, because Chloe is much better than that toxic Isabella. It is about time that Davis woke up and realized he deserved someone better than Isabella. Those two toxic people deserve each other, and they should leave Davis out of their mess. I went back to Chloe's luxury estate in Beverly Hills to recover from my injuries. Her face was bright red, and she was too shy to even look me in the eye. I sat down on the sofa and pulled her onto my lap with a firm grip. She let out a soft gasp, and her face turned even redder as she sat there nervously. I reached out and began to gently stroke her long and silky hair with my fingers. I whispered in her ear that I was sorry for being so blind to her love before. I promised her that I would never do anything to make her cry ever again. Chloe relaxed into my arms and began to cry as she told me she believed me. Since I was living his life, now I was going to make sure the ending was different. I was going to make sure that toxic couple paid for every single thing they did. In the original story, the Sterling family and the Harrison family were bitter business rivals. The Sterling family went bankrupt in the book, but they managed to hurt the Harrisons first. I was going to use my knowledge of the future to change the outcome of the war. Davis had inherited $200 million after his parents died in a tragic plane crash. He had also served as the vice president of the Harrison Company for 3 years. He knew every single corporate secret and weakness that the Harrison family was trying to hide. I wanted to see how Isabella would handle it when I started tearing her empire down. I told Chloe that I was going to invest my entire inheritance into her family business. We needed to secure several major contracts before the Harrison family even knew they existed. These projects were the key to the Harrison family expanding their business into the global market. Based on the timeline of the book, Isabella had not even started the negotiations yet. This was the perfect opportunity for us to strike while they were still being distracted. I also asked her to hire the best private investigators to start gathering dirt on Ethan. Chloe did not hesitate for a second and promised to do whatever I asked of her. The live comments were confused, and they were asking for someone to explain my plan. They were wondering if the story was turning into a revenge thriller instead of a romance. Some people thought I was crazy for trying to change my fate of dying in a fire. They laughed at me and said there was no way a loser like me could beat Ethan. Other people were excited to see the underdog finally waking up and taking control of his life. Isabella spent the next several weeks getting blackout drunk at high-end bars every single night. She could not stand being in her empty house because everything reminded her of Davis and his love. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face and remembered the life they shared. The thought that Davis was dead was slowly tearing her apart from the inside out. They had spent 7 years together, and she could not just forget about him that easily. She could not even lie to herself and say that she did not love him anymore. She felt like a huge piece of her heart had been ripped out of her chest. She was alone in a private clubroom with Ethan after all their friends had gone home. Isabella was completely wasted, and she was slumped on the sofa with a glazed look in her eyes. She looked incredibly seductive in the dim light of the private room as she lay there. Ethan looked at her with intense lust because he had wanted her for a very long time. Now that Davis was out of the way, there was nothing left to stop him from having her. He saw his chance and sat down next to her before pulling her into a tight embrace. Isabella reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck without even thinking about it. Ethan was thrilled and was about to kiss her when she began to mumble something in her sleep. "Davis, is that you? And have you finally come to take me back home with you? I have missed you so much, and I want to know where you have been all this time. Baby, please tell me that you're not still angry with me for what I did. I know I was wrong, so please just come back to me and never leave again." Ethan froze in shock, and his face twisted into a mask of pure hatred and jealousy. He tried to touch her again, but Isabella suddenly grabbed his wrist with a firm grip. She asked him what he was doing, and she shoved him away as she suddenly became sober. Ethan immediately put on a fake look of hurt and innocence to try and manipulate her. "Isabella, you know how much I love you and how much I want to be with you." He tried to hug her again, but she stepped aside and refused to let him touch her. She looked at his face, and she could not stop thinking about the moment he pushed Davis into the ocean. The memory of that moment kept playing in her head, and her expression became very dark. Ethan, I think that we both need to take some time apart to clear our heads. She grabbed her purse and walked out of the room without looking back at him once. The comments were furious because they were expecting a sex scene and got a rejection instead. Everyone was screaming at the author because the plot was not following the original book anymore. Davis is a genius for faking his death because it is already tearing the main couple apart. I cannot support this couple anymore because the story has become way too dark and twisted. Isabella returned to her mansion an hour later and found it completely silent. The house felt cold and empty as she walked through the dark and silent hallways. The porch light that Davis always left on for her was dark for the first time in years. It had been dark for a long time. She felt a sudden urge to call Davis even though she knew he was gone forever. The call went straight to voicemail, just like she knew it would. Suddenly, she received an iMessage from an unknown number containing several shocking photos. Isabella gasped when she saw that the photos were screenshots from a security camera. The man in the photos was clearly Ethan Miller, and he was not alone. He was talking to one of the men who had supposedly kidnapped her a few months ago. The photos showed Ethan laughing and drinking with a man who was supposed to be his enemy. It was obvious that they were old friends and that the entire kidnapping had been a setup. Isabella realized that Ethan had staged the entire kidnapping just to make himself look like a hero. Ethan had planned every single detail of the crime from the very beginning. He had lied to her face and told her that Davis was the one who hired the kidnappers. She remembered how she had locked Davis in the basement for 3 days as punishment for a crime he did not commit. She had almost killed the man who loved her, and the comments were going crazy over her reaction. The plot was completely ruined now that she knew the truth about Ethan's lies. Was she supposed to be kept in the dark forever? Ethan's reputation as a perfect gentleman was completely destroyed in an instant. I cannot support this couple anymore, and I hate Davis for ruining everything with those photos. Isabella needs to realize that Davis is just trying to manipulate her with these photos. You all need to wake up because Ethan is a monster who does not deserve to be the hero of any story. Davis is the only sane person left, and I love that this story has turned into a revenge thriller. Davis is a genius, and I cannot wait to see this toxic couple destroy each other. I smiled as I read the comments, because I knew that those photos were only the beginning of my revenge. I wanted Isabella to find out the rest of the truth on her own, so she would never doubt it. People always believe the things they discover for themselves more than what others tell them. Chloe was curled up against me in bed, and she looked like a beautiful and contented kitten. She looked up at me and asked me why I was smiling such a wicked smile. She had become very needy lately, and she wanted to be with me every second of the day. I grinned and ran my hand down her leg while telling her to guess what was on my mind. She blushed and gave me a seductive look before I pulled her closer to me. Isabella was sitting in her dark house, and she was struggling to process the truth. She realized that Ethan was the real mastermind behind the kidnapping. She tried to call the number that sent the photos, but it had already been disconnected. She was furious and decided to call the private investigator that her family always used. Her voice was cold and shaking with rage when the detective finally answered the phone. She ordered them to find out everything Ethan had done since he returned to the United States. She was shaking with rage at the thought that Ethan might have actually tried to murder Davis. She began to realize that she had been blind to Ethan's true nature for a very long time. She realized that every single fight she had with Davis was caused by something Ethan had said or done. The next 3 days were pure agony for Isabella, and she could not focus on her work at all. She stayed locked inside her mansion and refused to see anyone or take any phone calls. Ethan kept calling and texting her, but she ignored every single one of his attempts to reach her. Ethan showed up at her front door on the 3rd day before the detective could even call her back. He looked at her tired face and immediately began to act like he was worried about her health. He asked her why she was not answering his calls and told her how much he had been worrying about her. Isabella looked at him with bloodshot eyes and told him in a raspy voice that she was fine. Ethan walked into her house like he owned the place and shut the door behind him. Her phone rang the moment they sat down, and she saw it was the private investigator calling. The results of the investigation were finally ready. She gave Ethan a strange look before walking into her office to take the call in private. She told the detective to give her the report immediately. The detective told her that the investigation was finished and that Ethan was a very dangerous man. Every single thing Ethan had done since he returned was designed to destroy Davis Miller. The detective promised to send over all the surveillance footage and documents immediately. Isabella received a file containing a massive amount of evidence against Ethan Miller. She watched the videos and looked at the photos until her jaw was aching from clenching her teeth. She saw the video of Ethan slapping himself and then lying to her about Davis being the attacker. She remembered how she had slapped Davis 81 times because of that disgusting lie. She saw the proof that the kidnapping was a fake and that Ethan had framed Davis for it. Davis had nearly died in that basement because she was stupid enough to believe Ethan's lies. There was even a video of Ethan meeting with their biggest business rivals in secret. It was clear that Ethan was the one who had been selling their corporate secrets all along. The company lost millions of dollars, and she had blamed Davis for every single penny of it. Davis had been beaten so badly in jail that he came out with 3 broken ribs. Ethan had been bold enough to try and drown Davis right in front of her very eyes. She felt like a fool for believing that Davis had simply fallen into the water by accident. She remembered how Davis had spent 7 years protecting her and loving her unconditionally. She remembered the night he saved her life from that attacker and nearly died for her. Now the only man who ever truly loved her was dead because of Ethan Miller's cruelty. Isabella was shaking with a murderous rage, and her eyes were red with unshed tears. She whispered to herself that Ethan Miller was a much better liar than she ever imagined. The comments were screaming that Ethan was finished because Isabella looked like she was going to kill him. Some fans were still trying to defend Ethan, but most people realized the situation was over. Isabella was about to go on a rampage, and Ethan needed to run for his life immediately. Ethan needed to run for his life immediately before she caught him. Davis is a legend for faking his death and letting the toxic couple destroy each other like this. I am officially on Team Davis because he turned a trashy romance into an epic revenge story. Isabella looked absolutely terrifying, and people were telling her to calm down before she did something crazy. Isabella called her security team before walking out of her office to face Ethan. Ethan was sitting on the sofa, and he had no idea that his life was about to end. He started to shake when he saw the look in her eyes. He felt a wave of pure killing intent coming from her, and he wondered what he had done wrong. He wondered if he had been too aggressive with her at the club the other night. Isabella stood over him with a face that was as cold and hard as a piece of granite. She looked down at him with an intensity that made it almost impossible for him to breathe. Ethan's heart was racing as he tried to comfort her about Davis's supposed death. He told her that she needed to move on and focus on the man who was standing right in front of her. Isabella gave him a chilling smile and told him that he was absolutely right. She gritted her teeth and said that she was going to cherish him in a way he would never forget. She asked him if he really loved her, and she waited for his answer. He asked her if she really loved him, and he began to nod his head like a fool. He promised her that he would do anything in the world just to be with her forever. Isabella's face twisted in rage, and she slapped him across the face with all her strength. She screamed at him for framing Davis just so he could have her all to himself. She was shaking with rage as she told him that he was a dead man for what he had done. Ethan held his swollen face and began to cry while desperately denying everything she said. He asked her why she would think he would ever do something so horrible to Davis. She would have believed him if she had not already seen the undeniable proof of his crimes. She wanted to rip him apart when she thought about him trying to drown Davis in the ocean. Her security team entered the room, and she ordered them to pin Ethan to the floor. She promised that Ethan was going to feel every single ounce of pain that Davis had endured. She ordered them to slap him 81 times and break his ribs before locking him in the basement. The guards tackled Ethan to the ground and held him there so he could not escape. Ethan turned as white as a sheet, and he finally realized that he was in serious trouble. He screamed that she was crazy and swore on his life that he had never framed Davis. He begged her to believe him because she knew he was too kind to ever hurt anyone. He begged her to believe him because she knew he was too kind to ever hurt anyone. Isabella gritted her teeth and ground her high heel into the back of his hand with all her weight. Ethan let out a blood-curdling scream as his hand was crushed by her sharp heel. She mocked him for being kind while shoving the evidence right in his face. Isabella sneered and pushed the phone in front of him. Ethan saw the photos, and he began to choke on his own breath as he realized he was caught. He screamed that the photos were fake and that someone was trying to frame him for the crimes. Isabella had heard enough, and she coldly ordered her men to start the beating. Ethan tried to fight back, but the guards held him down and began to strike him. He begged for mercy and promised that he would never do anything wrong again if she just let him go. Some people were still screaming for her to stop, but most of the comments were cheering for his downfall. People were arguing about whether he deserved it or if the story had become too violent for them. Are you kidding me? I came here for the romance, not to watch a freaking horror movie. Everyone needs to chill because it is already over. The roast is finished and the male lead is officially toast. Run, Ethan, run. It looks like he has absolutely no way out of this mess. This trashy romance novel just turned into a hardcore revenge thriller, and I am totally here for it. This is exactly what he deserves. That manipulative snake is finally getting what is coming to him. Just because a guy is hot does not mean he is the hero of the story. He was nothing more than a handsome sociopath who thought he could play everyone for a fool. The head of security delivered a stinging slap to Ethan's face before kicking him hard in the ribs. He told the man to stay still unless he wanted to experience even more pain. The kick left Ethan's head spinning as his vision began to blur. That first slap was only the beginning of a long and agonizing punishment. The sound of repeated strikes echoed through the mansion like a series of gunshots. 8 guards took turns beating him until he lost count of the blows. He definitely received more than 81 slaps before they were finished with him. His once handsome face was transformed into a swollen and bloody mess that was completely unrecognizable. 3 days later, they dragged Ethan out of the basement, looking like a pile of broken meat. He smelled of filth, and his breathing was so shallow that he looked like he was about to die. It was clear that he would not survive much longer without immediate medical attention. They threw him into the back of a van and drove him out to the same jagged rocks where I had jumped into the ocean. The rough ride seemed to wake him up as his survival instincts finally kicked in. He realized where he was and began to tremble with a new kind of terror. He collapsed onto his knees and began to smash his forehead against the hard stones while begging for his life. He screamed that he was sorry and begged Isabella to take him to a hospital because he was afraid to die. He looked like a pathetic animal as he sobbed for mercy. He confessed to framing me and begged for a second chance to make things right. He kept hitting his head against the rocks until his forehead was split open and blood covered his face. The sound of his skull hitting the stone was enough to make anyone feel sick. Isabella told him that he was going to pay for every single thing he did to me. She coldly ordered her men to throw him into the ocean waves. Ethan realized that his life was over and his eyes filled with pure despair. He began to laugh hysterically and told Isabella that she was just as guilty as he was. He shouted that her own stupidity and cruelty were the real reasons why I was dead. He wanted her to know that she was a murderer just like him. He reminded her that she was the one who gave the orders to hurt me, and that made her a killer. His words sliced through her heart like a jagged blade and forced her to face the truth. She realized that she could never escape the blood on her own hands. Isabella closed her eyes and gave the final command to get rid of him. The guards stuffed him into a heavy canvas bag and added several large stones to make sure he sank. They tossed the bag into the dark water and watched as it vanished beneath the waves forever. The Harrison family business began to fall apart over the next few weeks as disaster after disaster struck. I used my resources to steal a massive contract that they were counting on to save their company. The Sterling family was finally winning the war, and Isabella had no idea I was behind it. Their stock price plummeted, and the company lost billions of dollars in a matter of days. It took less than 3 months for the once powerful Harrison empire to file for bankruptcy. Isabella was left with nothing but debt and a ruined reputation. A silver sedan suddenly swerved and slammed into her as she was crossing the street. The sound of the impact was deafening, and Isabella was thrown 30 feet through the air. She hit the pavement with a sickening thud, and everything went black. Isabella survived the accident, but she was left paralyzed, and her face was horribly scarred. She was doomed to spend the rest of her life in a wheelchair while hiding her face from the world. When she saw me walk in her hospital room, she looked like she had seen a ghost. She began to sob and begged me to forgive her for everything she had done. She told me she was sorry and asked me to come back to her so we could be together again. I looked down at her and let out a cold and heartless laugh. I reminded her that she was bankrupt and buried in millions of dollars of debt. She was a paralyzed and disfigured woman with absolutely nothing left to offer the world. I asked her why she thought I would ever want to be with someone as pathetic as her. I told her the truth about how I had faked my own death just to destroy her life. I also admitted that I was the one who filmed her killing Ethan and sent the footage to his parents. I wanted her to know that I was the one who orchestrated her entire downfall. Ethan was their only son, and they were never going to stop hunting for the person who killed him. I told her that his parents were coming for her, and there was nowhere left for her to hide. She was going to spend the rest of her life living in fear of their revenge. I decided to let her rot in a prison cell where she could think about her crimes for the rest of her life. She was going to die alone and forgotten behind cold iron bars. It was the perfect ending for a woman who had destroyed so many lives. The most difficult challenge in life isn't the act of fighting back, but the moment of true awakening. Once you refuse to play a part in someone else's script, you stop being a lowly supporting character in their story. You should never throw your deepest affections into a bottomless abyss, and you certainly shouldn't look for meaning in people who only exist to drain your soul. The world only truly turns the page for you when you finally begin to value yourself, because you're not a tool for anyone else, but the sole author of your own destiny.